At a family dinner surrounded by crystal chandeliers and judging eyes, he stood up, pointed at his pregnant wife, and said the words that would destroy him. "You are just a fat, poor nobody. You should be grateful anyone married you at all." Then he threw divorce papers in her face. His mother smiled. His mistress touched her belly. Everyone laughed. What he did not know, that quiet, humiliated woman owned 67% of his family's company. She had been buying it piece by piece for 8 months while they mocked her behind her back. But here is where this story gets crazy. Before she could expose him, she collapsed in the parking lot. Emergency surgery. Her heart stopped on the operating table. For 2 minutes and 37 seconds, she was clinically dead. She came back. And 12 hours later, from her hospital bed, still in a gown, still bleeding from surgery, she dialed into that boardroom and burned his entire empire to the ground. But that is not even the biggest twist. Because the real villain was not her husband. It was someone nobody suspected. Someone whose secret had been destroying this family for 20 years. Someone who let an innocent 15-year-old boy believe he killed his own brother. This story has 3 moments that will make your jaw drop. The first one happens in about 10 minutes. The second one, you will not see it coming. And the third one, the third one made me cry when I wrote it. So grab your coffee, get comfortable, and whatever you do, do not skip ahead, because every single detail in this story matters. Every single twist connects. And by the end, you will understand why this woman became the most dangerous person her husband ever underestimated. This is the story of Caroline Mitchell, and it starts with an earring. The chandelier cast soft golden light across the mahogany dining table, making everything look perfect on the surface. Crystal glasses sparkled. Silver cutlery gleamed. 12 guests sat in their expensive clothes, laughing at jokes that were not funny, pretending to enjoy food that cost more than most people earned in a week. Carolyn Mitchell Prescott sat at the far end of the table, her hands resting protectively on her swollen belly. 8 months pregnant. 8 months of carrying this child while her marriage crumbled around her like a house built on sand. She watched her husband Derek stand up at the head of the table, wine glass in hand, that charming smile spreading across his handsome face. The smile that had fooled her 3 years ago. The smile that no longer reached his eyes when he looked at her. "I would like to make an announcement," Derek said, his voice carrying across the silent room. Carolyn's heart began to pound. Something was wrong. She could feel it in the air, thick and suffocating like smoke before a fire. Derek's mother, Vivian, leaned forward in her chair, her thin lips curving into a smile that made Caroline's blood run cold. Across the table, a young woman named Amber touched her own stomach meaningfully, her eyes locked on Derek with an intimacy that made Caroline want to scream. "I am filing for divorce," Derek announced, as casually as if he were discussing the weather. Gasps rippled around the table, but not from everyone. Some faces showed satisfaction, some showed glee. Caroline realized with sickening clarity that this had been planned, rehearsed. She was the only one who did not know. "And before anyone feels sorry for her," Derek continued, pointing at Caroline like she was something he had scraped off his shoe, "let me be clear. She trapped me with that baby, a baby that might not even be mine." The words hit her like physical blows. Caroline gripped the edge of the table, fighting to keep her face neutral, even as her world shattered into a million pieces. Derek walked around the table toward her, his footsteps echoing on the hardwood floor. Each step felt like a countdown to something terrible. "You know what you are, Caroline?" He stopped beside her chair, looking down at her with contempt she had never seen so openly displayed. "You are just a fat, poor nobody. You came from nothing. You have nothing. And you should be grateful anyone married you at all." He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a folded stack of papers. Divorce papers. She recognized them immediately because she had been served with similar documents in her nightmares for months. Derek threw them in her face, the paper scattered across her plate, across the table, some fluttering to the floor like wounded birds. The room went completely silent, except for the sound of Caroline's heart pounding in her ears. Vivian smiled behind her wine glass. Amber covered her mouth in mock surprise, but her eyes were gleaming with triumph. Derek's father, Walter, sat stone-faced, saying nothing, doing nothing. Caroline stared at the papers in front of her. The words blurred together. Poor, fat, nobody, grateful. Every insult she had swallowed over 3 years of marriage rose up in her throat like bile. Every time she had made herself smaller to fit into their world. Every time she had pretended not to hear the whispered comments about her background, her education, her worth. But she did not cry. She did not beg. She did not give them the satisfaction. Slowly, carefully, Carolyn stood up. Her chair scraped against the floor in the silent room. She picked up her mother's silk scarf from her lap and folded it with trembling hands, pressing the lavender-scented fabric between her fingers. "Thank you, Derek," she said quietly. Her voice did not shake. "Thank you for finally being honest about who you are." She turned and walked toward the door. Each step felt like walking through water. Behind her, she heard whispers starting, laughter bubbling up, the celebration of her humiliation beginning. She did not look back. What they did not know, what none of them could possibly imagine, was that Carolyn Mitchell Prescott owned 67% of the company Derek thought belonged to his family. She had been buying it piece by piece for 8 months, while they laughed at her, while they planned this dinner, while they rehearsed their cruel performance. And in 72 hours, she would walk into a boardroom and destroy everything they thought they controlled. But first, she had to survive what came next. Carolyn made it to her car in the parking lot before her body betrayed her. Her hands were shaking so badly, she dropped her keys twice. The cool night air hit her face like a slap, and suddenly she could not breathe. She leaned against the car door, fumbling with her phone. She needed to call Marcus. Her brother would come get her. He would know what to do. Then the pain hit. Sharp, sudden, like a knife twisting in her abdomen. Carolyn gasped and doubled over, one hand pressed against her belly, the other gripping the car door for support. Something was wrong. Something was very wrong. She looked up and saw a figure standing at one of the mansion's windows, watching her. Amber. Just standing there, watching, making no move to help. The phone slipped from Caroline's fingers as another wave of pain crashed over her. She slid down the side of the car, landing hard on the cold concrete. The world started to go dark around the edges. The last thing she thought before unconsciousness claimed her was this. They wanted this. They wanted me to lose this baby. And then there was nothing but darkness. Beeping. Steady, rhythmic beeping that pulled Caroline back from the void. She opened her eyes to harsh fluorescent lights and white walls. Hospital. She was in a hospital. Her hand flew to her stomach, and she felt the reassuring swell of her belly, felt movement beneath her palm. The baby was still alive. "Mrs. Prescott," a doctor appeared beside her bed, his face grave. "I am Dr. Thompson. You experienced a partial placental abruption. The stress triggered early labor." Caroline's throat tightened. "The baby?" "We were able to stop the labor. Your baby is stable for now." He paused, and Carolyn knew there was more coming. "But you are on strict bed rest for the remainder of your pregnancy. Any significant stress could endanger both you and your child." Significant stress, like discovering your husband has been cheating on you, like being publicly humiliated at a family dinner, like having divorce papers thrown in your face while you were 8 months pregnant. "I understand," Carolyn whispered. The doctor nodded and left. Carolyn lay there in the silence, staring at the ceiling, trying to process everything that had happened. The dinner, the divorce papers, the fall. They wanted you to lose this baby. The thought kept circling back, dark and poisonous. Vivian's smile, Amber watching from the window, the rehearsed cruelty of Derek's announcement. Her phone buzzed on the bedside table. Marcus. She grabbed it and answered. "Caroline, thank God. I have been calling for hours. What happened? Where are you?" "Hospital. I collapsed. The baby is okay, but I am on bed rest." Silence on the other end. Then her brother's voice, low and dangerous. "What did they do to you?" Carolyn closed her eyes. "He threw divorce papers in my face at dinner, in front of everyone, called me a fat, poor nobody." Marcus swore viciously. "I am coming to get you." "Not yet. Just not yet. I need to think." "Think about what?" "Carolyn, these people are monsters." "I know." She opened her eyes and stared at the ceiling again. "That is exactly why I need to think." She hung up before he could argue. Her mind was already working, calculating, planning. The documents she had been collecting, the shares she had been secretly purchasing, the evidence of fraud she had discovered in the company's books, 8 months of careful preparation, 8 months of making herself invisible while she built her weapon in the shadows. But Derek did not know. His family did not know. They thought she was just a poor girl from Kentucky who got lucky enough to marry into money. They had no idea she had put herself through night school while working 2 jobs. They had no idea she was a forensic accountant who could read financial statements the way other people read novels. They had no idea about the inheritance her estranged father left her, guilt money from a man who abandoned her as a child and tried to make amends by leaving her $2.3 million when he died. They had no idea about the shell companies she had created, the shares she had purchased under her maiden name, the majority ownership she now held in Prescott Properties. Carolyn touched her belly, feeling her daughter move beneath her palm. "I will protect you. No matter what it takes, I will protect you." The door opened. Derek walked in. Caroline's heart stopped, then started again in a furious rhythm. He looked exactly like he had at the dinner. Immaculate suit, perfect hair, that smug smile on his handsome face. No concern in his eyes, no guilt, just cold calculation. "Well," he said, sitting down in the chair beside her bed without being invited. "That was quite a performance you gave, collapsing in the parking lot like that." "I had a medical emergency." "So I heard." He crossed his legs and pulled out another stack of papers from his jacket. "My lawyers have been busy. They say that if you are mentally unstable enough to collapse from a simple conversation, you are not fit to be a mother." The blood drained from Caroline's face. "What are you talking about?" "I am seeking full custody the moment that baby is born." He smiled, and it was the cruelest expression she had ever seen. "You can fight it, of course, but that will cost money, money you do not have, and lawyers cost even more money, money you definitely do not have." He leaned forward, his voice dropping to a whisper. "Here is how this is going to work, Carolyn. You are going to sign those divorce papers. You are going to walk away with nothing, and you are going to give me my child. Because if you do not, I will make your life a living hell. I will drag you through every court in this country. I will destroy what little reputation you have left, and in the end, you will lose anyway, because people like you always lose to people like me." Carolyn stared at him. This man she had married, this man she had loved, once upon a time, this man who was now threatening to take her child. "Get out," she said quietly. "Excuse me? Get out of my room, now." Derek laughed. "Or what? You will call security? Go ahead. They work for this hospital, and this hospital depends on Prescott family donations." He stood up and smoothed his jacket. "I will give you a few days to think about it. Sign the papers, Caroline. It is the smart thing to do." He walked out without looking back. Caroline lay there in the silence, tears streaming down her face despite her best efforts to hold them back. Her hand pressed against her belly, against her daughter, against the only thing that mattered anymore. "They want to take everything from me. My dignity, my money, my child." But somewhere beneath the fear and the grief, something else was rising, something cold and sharp and dangerous. They have no idea who they are dealing with. 3 days later, Carolyn was home on bed rest in the small apartment she had rented after leaving the Prescott mansion. Marcus had moved in to help her, sleeping on the couch, making sure she had everything she needed. The apartment was modest by any standard. 1 bedroom, a tiny kitchen, a living room that served as office, dining room, and Marcus's bedroom all at once. After 3 years in the Prescott mansion, it should have felt like a step down. Instead, it felt like freedom. Carolyn sat propped up on her bed, laptop balanced on her belly, trying to continue the work she had started months ago. But every document she requested from Prescott Properties came back marked unavailable. Every contact she reached out to suddenly stopped responding. Every door she tried to open slammed shut in her face. Derek had frozen her out completely. "You need to eat something." Marcus appeared in the doorway with a sandwich and a glass of milk. "Doctor's orders." "Well, only the doctor said bed rest. He did not say anything about eating." "I am saying something about eating." Marcus set the plate on her bedside table and sat down in the chair nearby. "Talk to me, Carolyn. What is going on in that brain of yours?" Caroline closed her laptop with a sigh. I had a plan, a good plan, but they are blocking everything. I cannot access the files I need. I cannot talk to the people I need to talk to. So find another way. There is no other way, not unless someone on the inside decides to help me, and that is never going to happen. Everyone in that family is loyal to Vivian. They are terrified of her. The doorbell rang. Marcus frowned and stood up. Stay here, I will get it. Carolyn heard him walk to the door, heard the chain rattle as he opened it, then silence, then voices, too low to make out. Caroline, Marcus called, you need to see this. She struggled out of bed and waddled to the living room, one hand supporting her back. Standing in the doorway was a woman in her late 50s, gray hair pulled back in a neat bun, wearing the simple black dress of household staff. Betty Morrison, the Prescott family's housekeeper for over 30 years. Mrs. Caroline, Betty said, her voice barely above a whisper, I should not be here. If they knew. Betty, what is wrong? Is someone hurt? No, ma'am, not yet anyway. Betty glanced nervously at Marcus, then back at Caroline. I have worked for that family for 30 years. I have seen things, heard things, things that would curl your hair. Caroline's heart began to pound. What kind of things? I tried to stay out of it, mind my own business, like my mama taught me. But what they did to you at that dinner? Betty's eyes filled with tears. I cannot stand by anymore, not when they are trying to hurt an innocent baby. She reached into her purse and pulled out a small flash drive. Everything is on there. Emails, recordings, documents, Mrs. Vivian thought she deleted. She does not know I have a copy of everything that goes through that house. Been keeping records for years just in case. Caroline took the flash drive with trembling hands. Betty, why? Why risk yourself like this? Betty met her eyes. Because you were always kind to me. You learned my name. You asked about my grandchildren. You treated me like a person, not like furniture. She paused. And because that dinner was not spontaneous, they rehearsed it. I heard them practicing the night before. Every word Derek said, they planned it. They wanted to hurt you so bad you would lose that baby. The words hit Caroline like a physical blow. She had suspected, but hearing it confirmed was something else entirely. There is more, Betty continued. Mr. Walter has been up to something. Late-night phone calls, secret meetings, money moving around in ways that do not make sense. And that woman, that Amber, she is not just sleeping with Mr. Derek. She has been talking to Mr. Walter, too. Something bad is coming, Mrs. Caroline. Something real bad. Betty took a step back toward the door. I have to go now. They will notice if I am gone too long. But you use what is on that drive. You protect yourself and that baby. She paused in the doorway. Your mama would be proud of you, Mrs. Caroline. Fighting back instead of laying down. That takes real courage. And then she was gone, the door closing softly behind her. Caroline stood frozen, staring at the flash drive in her hand. Evidence, real evidence. Not just her own suspicions, but proof. Well, Marcus said quietly, looks like you found your way in. Caroline looked up at her brother, and for the first time since the dinner, she felt something other than despair. She felt hope. That night, after Marcus went to sleep on the couch, Caroline plugged the flash drive into her laptop and began to read. What she found exceeded her worst expectations. Emails between Vivian and her society friends, spreading rumors that Caroline had trapped Derek with a pregnancy. Messages coordinating the timing of the divorce announcement to maximize Caroline's humiliation. Financial documents showing money being moved through shell companies she had never heard of. But the most damning evidence was about Walter. Derek's quiet, seemingly passive father had been busy, very busy. For the past 2 years, he had been systematically looting his own company. $47 million siphoned into offshore accounts. Properties sold to shell companies at below-market prices, then flipped for profit into accounts that led nowhere traceable. Prescott Properties was not just struggling, it was being gutted from the inside. And there was more. Amber Lawson was not just Derek's mistress. She had been secretly communicating with Walter for over 2 years. The emails were explicit. The relationship was clear. Amber was sleeping with both father and son. Caroline felt sick as she read the messages. The fake pregnancy Amber claimed to be carrying, it was not Derek's baby she was pretending to carry. It was Walter's. The old man had promised to leave Vivian for her, to run away together with the money he had been stealing. Derek was just a cover story, a distraction, a fool. But there was one more file on the drive, one more secret that Betty had somehow uncovered. It was an old police report from 20 years ago, the night Derek's older brother Thomas died in a car accident, the night that had shattered the Prescott family and shaped everything that came after. Derek had been 15 years old. According to the official story, he had been driving when the car went off the road. Thomas died at the scene. Derek walked away physically unharmed, but emotionally destroyed. His parents had blamed him ever since. His whole life had been built on that guilt, that desperate need to prove himself worthy despite killing his brother. But the police report on Betty's drive told a different story. Handwritten notes in the margins, crossed out sections, a witness statement that had been suppressed. Walter had been driving. Walter had been drunk. Walter had let his 15-year-old son take the blame to protect himself from a DUI charge that would have destroyed his career. Carolyn stared at the screen, her mind reeling. Everything she thought she knew about this family was wrong. Derek was not just a cruel man. He was a broken man, twisted by a lie his father had told him for 20 years. She did not feel sorry for him. Not after what he had done to her, but she understood him now in a way she never had before, and she held in her hands the power to destroy not just Derek, but his entire family. The question was, what would she do with it? Carolyn spent the next week building her case. She cross-referenced Betty's files with her own research. She documented every transaction, every email, every piece of evidence she could find. She called Diane Hartwell, her lawyer, and laid everything out. "If this is real," Diane said over the phone, her voice tense with excitement, "we do not just have a divorce case. We have criminal fraud. We can take everything." Carolyn allowed herself a moment of hope, a moment of imagining what it would feel like to walk into that boardroom and watch their faces when they realized who really owned the company. "How long until we can move forward?" Carolyn asked. "Give me a week to verify everything. I want this airtight, no room for them to wiggle out." Diane paused. "You are sure about this, Carolyn? Once we start, there is no going back. You are declaring war on one of the most powerful families in the state." Caroline touched her belly, felt her daughter kick against her palm. "I am sure." She hung up and leaned back against her pillows, exhausted but energized. For the first time since the dinner, she felt like she had a chance, like maybe, just maybe, she could win. Marcus knocked on her door frame. "You have that look again." "What look?" "The Bobby Miller look." He grinned. "Remember? 3rd grade, hot sauce in his milk?" Despite everything, Carolyn laughed. "I remember. You told Mom you were conducting a scientific experiment on lactose reactions. It was a valid scientific hypothesis." Marcus sat down in his usual chair, his face growing serious. "So what is the plan? And do not tell me you are just planning baby names, because I know better." Carolyn hesitated. She had kept her brother in the dark about most of the details, not wanting to implicate him in anything illegal. But he deserved to know something. "I have evidence," she said carefully. "Evidence that could destroy them. And I have something else they do not know about." "The shares?" She stared at him. "How did you know about that?" "I am your brother. I pay attention." He leaned forward. "How much do you own?" 67%. Majority control." Marcus let out a low whistle. "You have been busy." "I have been patient, like Mama taught us." "Speaking of Mama," Marcus said, reaching into his pocket, "I found this in my stuff when I moved in here. Thought you might want it." He handed her a worn photograph. Their mother, young and smiling, holding a baby Caroline in her arms. On the back, in faded handwriting, "My strong girl, my fighter." Caroline's eyes filled with tears. "Thank you." She would be proud of you, Caroline, fighting back instead of giving up. That takes guts. "I do not feel gutsy. I feel terrified." That is what real courage is. Marcus stood up and headed for the door, feeling scared and doing it anyway. 3 days later, Diane Hartwell's face appeared on Caroline's laptop screen, and Caroline knew immediately that something was wrong. What happened? Carolyn asked, her stomach dropping. Someone leaked our strategy to the Prescotts. Diane's voice was tight with anger. They know about the shell companies. They know you have been buying shares and they have filed an injunction. An injunction for what? They are claiming you obtained those shares through marital fraud, that you hid assets during the marriage. Diane took a breath. They are also citing your hospitalization as evidence of mental instability. They are asking a judge to freeze all your assets and appoint a guardian to manage your finances for your own protection. Carolyn felt like she had been punched in the stomach. That is not true. That money was my inheritance. I never hid anything. I know, but they have also found the leak. Diane's jaw tightened. One of my junior associates, they paid him off. He gave them everything. The room seemed to spin. Everything Carolyn had built, everything she had planned for months, was now exposed. Worse than exposed. Weaponized against her. What do we do? Carolyn whispered. We fight, but Caroline... Diane hesitated. They have powerful lawyers, expensive lawyers, and with your assets frozen, you cannot afford to match them dollar for dollar. This is going to be a long, ugly battle. After the call ended, Carolyn sat in silence for a long time. The laptop screen dimmed, then went dark. Outside her window, the sun set and night fell. Marcus found her at 3 in the morning, still sitting in the same position, staring at nothing. Hey, he sat down beside her on the bed. Talk to me. I did everything right. Her voice cracked. I was patient, I was smart, I had proof. And they still won. They always win, Marcus. People like us do not get to beat people like them. Marcus was quiet for a moment. Then he said, remember when I came back from my second deployment? I told you about the ambush. 12 of us, surrounded, no backup coming. You never told me how you got out. We did not fight our way out. We waited. For 3 days we waited in that building, watching them, learning their patterns. On the 4th day, they got sloppy. They thought they had won. That is when we moved. He looked at her, his eyes fierce in the darkness. You are in the building right now, Carolyn. They think they have won. That is when people make mistakes. Carolyn closed her eyes. I am so tired. I know, but you are not beaten. Not yet. He squeezed her hand. Rock bottom has a gift hidden in it. When you have nothing left to lose, you have nothing left to fear, and people who are not afraid are dangerous. The next morning, Carolyn woke with a strange clarity. Marcus was right. She had been operating from fear, from desperation, from the hope of winning. But now that hope was gone. And with it, the fear. She had nothing left to lose. That meant she had nothing left to hold her back. She opened her laptop and went back to Betty's files. The first time through, she had been looking for evidence of fraud, of infidelity, of cruelty. She had found all of that. But now she looked deeper. She read every email, every document, every scrap of data with fresh eyes, looking for something she had missed. And she found it. Buried in a chain of emails between Amber and Walter was a reference to something called Project Sunset, a plan to liquidate Prescott properties entirely, transfer all remaining assets to offshore accounts, and disappear. The plan was scheduled to execute in 2 weeks. Walter was not just stealing from his company. He was planning to destroy it completely and vanish with the money. Amber would go with him. Vivian would be left with nothing. Derek would be left with nothing. Everyone would be left with nothing except Walter and his mistress. Caroline kept digging. She found airline reservations to a country with no extradition treaty. She found a real estate listing for a villa in South America. She found a bank account in the Cayman Islands with $47 million in it. Walter Prescott was 2 weeks away from pulling off the greatest heist in the family's history, and nobody knew except Amber. And now Caroline. She sat back, her mind racing. This changed everything. Derek was not her enemy. Not really. Derek was a pawn in his father's game, just like everyone else. But there was still the matter of the accident, the lie that had shaped Derek's entire life. Caroline pulled up the old police report again, reading the handwritten notes more carefully this time. The witness statement that had been suppressed was from a gas station attendant who had seen the crash. He described 2 people in the front seat. The older one was driving. Walter had been driving. Walter had been drunk. And when the police arrived, he had somehow convinced them that his 15-year-old son was behind the wheel. Derek had spent 20 years believing he killed his brother, 20 years of guilt, of self-hatred, of trying to prove himself worthy to parents who blamed him for something he did not do. Caroline understood now why Derek was the way he was. Not excused, understood. He was cruel because he had been taught that he deserved cruelty. He was cold because warmth had been denied to him since he was 15 years old. It did not make what he did to her okay. It did not make her forgive him. But it made her see him differently. She had two weapons now, the evidence of Walter's fraud, which could take down the family financially, and the truth about the accident, which could either destroy Derek completely or set him free. The question was still the same. What would she do with it? Have you ever held someone's fate in your hands? Have you ever known a secret so powerful it could rebuild or destroy an entire family? Carolyn Mitchell sat with that weight for 3 days. 3 days of thinking, planning, weighing her options. 3 days of feeling her daughter move inside her and wondering what kind of world she wanted to bring this child into. On the 4th day, she made her decision. She called Derek. He answered on the second ring, suspicious immediately. Carolyn, what do you want? To talk, in person, somewhere neutral. Why would I do that? Because I have information you need to hear. Information about your father. Silence on the other end. Then, what about my father? Meet me tomorrow, the coffee shop on 3rd Street, 11 a.m. She paused. Come alone, Derek. This is not a trap. This is something much more important than our divorce. She hung up before he could argue. The coffee shop on 3rd Street was the kind of place where secrets were exchanged. Dim lighting, worn leather booths, the smell of burnt coffee, and quiet desperation. Carolyn had chosen it specifically because no one from the Prescott world would ever set foot in a place this ordinary. She sat in the back booth, her swollen belly pressed against the edge of the table, her hands wrapped around a cup of decaf tea that had gone cold 20 minutes ago. Her mother's silk scarf was draped around her neck, the faint scent of lavender giving her courage she did not feel. Every time the door opened, her heart jumped. Every time it was not Derek, she exhaled slowly and tried to calm the trembling in her hands. She had not slept in 3 days. Not since she discovered the truth about Walter. Not since she realized that the man she had been fighting was not her real enemy at all. The door opened again. This time it was him. Derek Prescott walked into the coffee shop like he owned it, even though everything about this place was beneath him. His suit probably cost more than the entire monthly revenue of this establishment. His watch glinted under the fluorescent lights. His face was a mask of cold hostility. He spotted her in the back and walked over without acknowledging the waitress who tried to greet him. He slid into the seat across from Caroline without a word of greeting, without a handshake, without any of the social niceties that normal people exchanged. You have 5 minutes, he said flatly, and this better be worth my time. Caroline studied his face, the face she had once loved, the face that had sneered at her as he threw divorce papers across a dinner table, the face that had called her a fat, poor nobody. But now, looking closer, she saw something she had never noticed before. Exhaustion. Not physical tiredness, but something deeper. Soul-deep weariness from carrying a weight that had been crushing him for 20 years. I am not here to beg, she said, her voice steady despite her racing heart. I am not here to negotiate the divorce. I am not here to ask you to take back those things you said. Derek raised an eyebrow. Then why am I here? Because your father is about to steal everything your family has ever built and disappear to South America with your mistress. The words landed like bombs in the quiet coffee shop. Derek's face went completely blank. Not angry, not dismissive, just empty, like his brain was trying to process information that did not compute. What are you talking about? Carolyn pulled her laptop from her bag and set it on the table between them. Her fingers trembled slightly as she opened it and turned the screen to face him. These are emails between your father and Amber Lawson. They have been having an affair for 2 years. Longer than you have been sleeping with her. She watched his eyes move across the screen, watched his expression shift like clouds crossing the sun. Skepticism first, then confusion, then something darker, something that looked almost like recognition, like a part of him had always suspected but never allowed himself to see. "That is not possible," he said slowly, but his voice lacked conviction. "Keep reading." He scrolled through the emails, his face growing paler with each one. The secret plans, the stolen money, the villa in South America that Walter had already purchased under a shell company name, the airline tickets booked for two, departing in 14 days, the fake pregnancy. Derek stopped scrolling. His finger hovered over a particular email, and Carolyn watched his jaw tighten as he read it. "She was never pregnant with your baby," Carolyn said quietly. "She was never pregnant at all. The whole thing was a lie, Derek. A manipulation to make you leave me faster, to create chaos in your family, to position herself as the future Mrs. Prescott." She paused, letting the words sink in. "But not your Mrs. Prescott, your father's." Derek sat in absolute silence for what felt like an eternity. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely audible, cracked and broken in a way Carolyn had never heard before. "Amber and my father? For 2 years, she has been using you to get close to your family's money. She has been feeding information to Walter about everything, your business decisions, your relationships, your weaknesses, and your father has been using that information to manipulate everyone around him." Derek laughed, but there was no humor in it, just bitterness and something that sounded almost like relief, like a man who had finally been given permission to stop pretending. "I should have known," he muttered. "I should have seen it. The way she always asked about Dad's schedule. The way she seemed to know things she should not have known." He looked up at Caroline, and for the first time, she saw something in his eyes that was not hostility. It was confusion, vulnerability, fear. "Why are you telling me this? After everything I did to you? Why would you help me?" "I am not helping you," Caroline said carefully. "I am helping myself, and helping you happens to be part of that." She paused. "There is more, Derek. Something else you need to know." "More?" He laughed again, that same bitter, broken sound. "What could possibly be more than finding out my father is stealing from his own family and sleeping with my girlfriend?" Carolyn took a deep breath. This was the moment she had been dreading. The moment that would either break Derek completely or set him free. 20 years ago, she said slowly, your brother Thomas died in a car accident." Derek's entire body went rigid. His face, which had been pale before, now looked like marble, cold and hard and lifeless. "Do not," he said quietly, "do not talk about Thomas." "I have to, because everything you believe about that night is a lie." Derek's hands clenched into fists on the table. "I was driving. I lost control. Thomas died. That is not a lie. That is what happened." "Is it?" Carolyn turned the laptop to show him a different file. A scanned document, yellowed with age, covered in handwritten notes and crossed-out sections. "This is the original police report from that night. The one that was filed before your father's lawyers got involved." Derek stared at the screen but did not move to read it. "There was a witness," Caroline continued, "a gas station attendant who saw the crash happen. He gave a statement to the police that night, a statement that was later suppressed." She scrolled to the relevant section and pointed. "He saw two people in the front seat of that car, Derek, and he was very clear about which one was driving." Derek's eyes moved to the screen. Carolyn watched him read the words, watched his face transform from rigid control to confusion to dawning horror. "Your father was driving," Carolyn said softly. "He was drunk. He lost control of the car, and when the police arrived, he somehow convinced them to change the report, to say that you were behind the wheel." Derek was shaking his head slowly, back and forth, like a man trying to wake up from a nightmare. "No, no, that is not. I remember." "What do you remember, Derek? Really remember? You were 15 years old. You had just been in a traumatic accident. Your brother was dead, and your father was there, telling you what happened, telling you it was your fault." Tears were streaming down Derek's face now. Not the controlled, dignified tears of a man who allows himself to show emotion. These were ugly tears, raw tears. The tears of a boy who had been carrying an impossible weight for 2 decades and was only now realizing it had never been his to carry. "I did not kill him," he whispered. "I did not kill Thomas." "No, you did not. My father let me believe." His voice broke completely. For 20 years. He watched me hate myself. He watched Mom blame me. He watched our whole family fall apart. And he never said anything. Carolyn sat in silence, letting him process. There was nothing she could say that would make this easier. Nothing that would undo 20 years of guilt and self-hatred and broken relationships. All she could do was give him the truth and let him decide what to do with it. Finally, after what felt like hours, Derek looked up at her. His eyes were red and swollen, his face wet, but there was something different in his expression now. Something that looked almost like clarity. "Why?" he asked. "Why are you really telling me this?" "Because everyone deserves to know the truth about their own life, even people who have been cruel to me." She met his eyes steadily. "I am not forgiving you, Derek. I am not saying what you did was okay. The things you said at that dinner, the way you treated me, the custody threats, none of that disappears because I found out your father is a monster." She paused. "But I am also not like you. I do not destroy people for the pleasure of destroying them. What you do with this information is up to you." Derek was silent for a long moment, processing everything. The affair, the stolen money, the truth about Thomas, 20 years of his life, built on a lie his father told. "What do you want from me?" he finally asked. "An alliance? Temporary, purely strategic." Carolyn closed the laptop. "You help me expose your father's fraud at the board meeting next week. I help you get the truth about Thomas out in the open. And in return, you drop the custody claim, you unfreeze my assets, you let me fight this divorce on fair terms instead of trying to crush me under a mountain of lawyers and legal fees." Derek studied her face. "What if I refuse?" "Then I release everything anyway. Your father goes to prison, your mother loses everything. The company collapses, and you," she looked at him steadily, "you spend the rest of your life knowing your father destroyed you and got away with it, knowing you could have stopped him, but chose not to." The coffee shop was silent except for the distant sound of dishes clanking in the kitchen. Derek stared at the table between them, his mind clearly racing through options, calculating outcomes, weighing costs and benefits. This was the moment that would determine everything that came next. Finally, slowly, he nodded. "Okay," he said quietly. "I am in." Carolyn exhaled a breath she did not realize she had been holding. "But I have one condition," Derek added. "What is it?" He looked at her, and for the first time since he had walked into this coffee shop, his eyes held something that was not hostility or pain, something that almost looked like respect. "When this is over, when my father is exposed and the truth about Thomas is out, I want you to know something." He paused. "I was wrong about you. That night at dinner, everything I said, I was wrong. You are not a nobody, Caroline. You are the most dangerous person my family has ever underestimated." Caroline felt something shift in her chest. Not forgiveness, not reconciliation, but something like acknowledgement, recognition that even the cruelest people could sometimes see clearly. "We have 2 weeks," she said. "Let us get to work." For the next 2 weeks, Carolyn Mitchell and Derek Prescott lived in a strange parallel universe. By day, they pretended nothing had changed. Derek went to the office and played the loyal son. Caroline stayed in her small apartment and played the beaten wife waiting for her divorce to finalize. But at night, they met in secret locations across the city, parking garages at midnight, empty office buildings after hours, once in the back of a church that Derek knew would be empty on a Wednesday evening. They did not talk about their marriage. They did not talk about the dinner, or the divorce papers, or the cruel words that still echoed in Caroline's mind every time she looked at him. They talked about evidence, about strategy, about how to bring down Walter Prescott without warning him in advance. Derek provided access to documents Caroline could never have reached on her own. Financial records that showed the full extent of his father's theft. Email chains that proved the affair with Amber. Bank statements that traced the money from Prescott Properties accounts to offshore shells, and finally to a numbered account in the Cayman Islands. $47 million. That was how much Walter had stolen from his own family's company. $47 million that he planned to take to South America, where he and Amber would live like royalty while everyone he left behind struggled to pick up the pieces. Carolyn provided the analytical skills to piece it all together. Her training as a forensic accountant had prepared her for exactly this kind of work. She could see patterns in numbers that other people missed. She could follow money through layers of shell companies and fake transactions like a bloodhound following a scent. Together, they built a case that was airtight, unshakable, devastating. The board meeting was scheduled for Thursday, 2 days before Project Sunset was supposed to execute. Carolyn would appear via video conference from her apartment, where she was still technically on bed rest. She would reveal her ownership stake. She would present the evidence of fraud. Derek would confirm everything and call for his father's immediate removal. It was a good plan, a solid plan. And then, the night before the meeting, everything fell apart. Carolyn woke at 2 in the morning with a pain in her abdomen that made her scream. This was not like the contractions she had been having for weeks, the Braxton Hicks that Dr. Thompson had assured her were normal. This was different. This was worse. This was a knife twisting in her gut, a fire spreading through her pelvis, a wrongness so profound that her body knew immediately something catastrophic was happening. "Marcus!" she screamed. "Marcus, help me!" Her brother burst through the door of her bedroom, took one look at her face, and grabbed his phone from his pocket. 911. "I need an ambulance immediately. My sister is pregnant, 9 months. She is bleeding heavily. The address is 427 Maple Street, apartment 3B. Please hurry. Bleeding." The word registered in Caroline's mind through the haze of pain. She looked down and saw the dark stains spreading across her white sheets. Blood. Too much blood. More blood than there should ever be. "No," she whispered. "No, not now, not tonight. Please, God, not tonight." She had come so far. She had fought so hard. The meeting was in 12 hours. 12 hours and she would finally have her revenge, finally expose Walter's crimes, finally take control of the company she had secretly been buying for 8 months. But none of that mattered if her baby died. "The baby," she gasped, grabbing Marcus's arm with a grip so tight her nails left marks. "Save the baby. Promise me. Whatever happens, save the baby." Marcus's face was pale with fear, but his voice was steady. "The ambulance is coming. Just hang on, Caroline. Just hold on." The next minutes were a blur of sirens and flashing lights and strangers in uniforms flooding into her tiny apartment. Paramedics lifting her onto a stretcher. The cold night air hitting her face as they wheeled her outside. The slam of ambulance doors closing, the wail of the siren as they raced through empty streets toward the hospital. "Partial placental abruption," someone said. "She is losing too much blood. We need to prep for emergency surgery." Caroline tried to speak, tried to tell them about the meeting, about the plan, about everything that was supposed to happen in the morning, but the words would not come. Her mouth was dry, her vision was blurring, and the pain had become so overwhelming that thinking was almost impossible. They wheeled her into the harsh lights of the emergency room. More strangers, more uniforms, more hands touching her, moving her, hooking her up to machines that beeped and whirred. "We need to do a C-section," a doctor said. "Now, we are losing her." Someone put a mask over her face. Sweet-smelling whey filled her lungs. The world began to fade around the edges. The last thing Caroline saw was the clock on the wall, 2:17 a.m. The last thing she heard was the sound of her own heartbeat on the monitor. Steady, then unsteady, then silence. For 2 minutes and 37 seconds, Caroline Mitchell was clinically dead. Her heart stopped on the operating table while doctors worked frantically to save both her and her baby. The monitors showed a flat line. The room filled with the terrible sound of continuous alarm. Nurses shouted for the crash cart while the surgeon kept cutting, kept working, desperate to get the baby out before it was too late. They shocked her. Once, twice, 3 times. Her body jerked on the table, but her heart refused to restart. 2 minutes and 37 seconds of nothing. No light at the end of a tunnel, no departed loved ones waiting to greet her. No sense of peace or warmth or transcendence. Just darkness. Cold, empty darkness. And somewhere in that darkness, a voice. Her mother's voice, faint but clear. "Get up, baby girl, you are not done yet. Get up and fight." Carolyn's heart stuttered once, then again, then caught like an engine turning over on a cold morning, and began to beat. The monitors came back to life. The alarm stopped screaming. The doctors exhaled. She is back, someone said. We have her. But Caroline did not hear any of it. She was unconscious, floating in a drugged haze between life and death, unaware that her daughter had been born 3 minutes after her heart stopped. A tiny girl, 5 pounds, 2 ounces, too small, too early, rushed to the ICU before she could draw her first breath outside her mother's body. Fighting for life in an incubator, hooked to machines fragile as a soap bubble in a hurricane. Marcus Webb had served 2 tours in Afghanistan. He had been shot at, bombed, ambushed. He had watched friends die in his arms and kept fighting. He had been trained to handle crisis, to stay calm when everything was falling apart. None of that prepared him for sitting in a hospital waiting room at 4 in the morning, not knowing if his sister and her baby were alive or dead. He paced the worn carpet for hours. He drank vending machine coffee that tasted like burnt plastic. He called everyone he could think of. Diane Hartwell, Carolyn's lawyer, the office number at Prescott Properties, even though no one answered at that hour. And finally, against his better judgment, he called Derek. The phone rang twice before a groggy voice answered. Who is this? It is Marcus, Caroline's brother. You need to get to St. Mary's Hospital. Now. What happened? Derek's voice sharpened immediately, all traces of sleep vanishing. She collapsed. Something with the pregnancy. They are doing emergency surgery. Marcus's voice cracked. They do not know if she is going to make it. Silence on the other end. Then, I am on my way. Yet Derek arrived at the hospital at 4:15, white-faced and shaking. He found Marcus in the waiting room and sat down beside him without a word. They did not speak. There was nothing to say. 2 men who should have been enemies, sitting side by side in a hospital waiting room, united by their fear for a woman they both, in different ways, cared about. At 6:30, a doctor finally emerged. Family of Caroline Mitchell? Marcus shot to his feet. Is she alive? The doctor's face was grave but not hopeless. She is stable now. We almost lost her on the table. Her heart stopped for over 2 minutes, but she is a fighter. She came back. And the baby? A girl. She is in the NICU. Premature, underweight, but alive. The next 48 hours will be critical for both of them. Marcus felt his knees go weak with relief. He grabbed the back of a chair to steady himself. Can I see her? She is still unconscious, but yes, you can sit with her, room 312. Marcus turned to Derek. Are you coming? Derek shook his head slowly. I will wait here. She probably does not want to see me when she wakes up. Marcus studied him for a moment, then nodded and followed the doctor down the hallway. Carolyn opened her eyes to sunlight streaming through hospital windows and the distant sound of machines beeping. She was alive. That was the first thing she registered. She was only and the pain was gone, replaced by a dull ache and the foggy numbness of heavy medication. The second thing she registered was the emptiness in her abdomen. The baby. Where was the baby? Caroline. Marcus appeared at her bedside, his face haggard with exhaustion, but split by a relieved smile. Caroline, can you hear me? The baby, she croaked, her throat raw and dry. Where is my baby? She is alive. Marcus squeezed her hand. She is in the NICU. She is small, but she is fighting, just like her mama. Tears spilled down Caroline's cheeks, alive. Her daughter was alive. Then, like a bucket of ice water, the memory crashed over her. The meeting, the board meeting, Walter, the evidence, everything they had been planning for weeks. What time is it? She gasped. Marcus's face fell. Caroline, you need to rest. You almost died. Your heart stopped for over 2 minutes. What time is it, Marcus? He sighed. 8:15 a.m. The board meeting is supposed to start at 11. Carolyn tried to sit up and gasped as pain shot through her abdomen. We have less than 3 hours. Carolyn, you cannot possibly. Walter moved the meeting up, did he not? He knows I am in the hospital. He is making his move today. Carolyn grabbed her brother's arm with surprising strength. I need a phone now. You are in no condition to. Marcus. Her voice was sharp, desperate, nothing like the weak whisper it had been moments before. If I do not make that meeting, Walter gets away with everything. He takes the money and disappears. The company collapses. Everyone who works there loses their jobs. And my daughter grows up knowing her mother had the chance to stop it and did not. She met his eyes, her own blazing with determination. I did not die on that table and come back just to give up now. Get me a phone. Marcus stared at her for a long moment. Then slowly he smiled. You know, he said, pulling his phone from his pocket, Mom would be proud of you right now. Stubborn as hell, just like her. Carolyn took the phone and dialed Diane Hartwell's number with trembling fingers. Diane, it is Caroline. I need you to patch me into the board meeting via video conference. I know I am in the hospital. I do not care. Make it happen. Silence on the other end. Then, Caroline, you just had emergency surgery. Your heart stopped. You should be resting, not... I should be a lot of things, Diane. Right now, I need to be in that boardroom. Can you make it happen or not? More silence. Then a sigh. I will make some calls. You have 2 hours. Carolyn hung up and looked at Marcus. Help me sit up and find me something to wear that does not have a hospital logo on it. Her brother raised an eyebrow. You are planning to attend a board meeting from your hospital bed while wearing a cardigan and looking like death warmed over? I am planning to destroy the man who tried to take everything from me. Carolyn's eyes were fierce, burning with a fire that her near-death experience had only intensified. Looking like death warmed over just makes the victory sweeter. The Prescott Properties boardroom occupied the entire top floor of a downtown skyscraper. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the city below. A mahogany conference table, hand-carved and worth more than most houses, dominated the center of the room. Crystal chandeliers cast warm light across leather chairs that cost $5,000 each. It was a room designed to intimidate, to remind everyone who entered that the Prescott family had power, money, and the willingness to use both. At 11 o'clock on Thursday morning, that room was filled with people who had no idea their world was about to implode. Walter Prescott sat at the head of the table, looking exactly like what he was, a man who believed he had won. His silver hair was perfectly styled, his suit immaculately tailored, his expression radiating the smug confidence of someone who had spent his entire life getting away with everything. To his right sat Vivian Prescott, elegant in a cream-colored designer dress, diamonds glittering at her throat and ears. She looked bored, the way rich people look when they are forced to attend meetings they consider beneath them. Amber Lawson stood in the corner near the door, dressed in a conservative black suit that did nothing to hide her beauty. She was playing the role of humble assistant today, fading into the background, invisible to everyone except Walter, who glanced at her occasionally with a look that said, "Soon, my darling, soon this will all be ours." The board members filled the remaining seats, 7 men and women who had been with the company for decades. They shuffled papers and checked phones and whispered to each other, confused about why this emergency meeting had been called, but too accustomed to Walter's leadership to question it openly. The door opened and Derek Prescott walked in. His parents looked up, surprised but not alarmed. Derek rarely attended board meetings. He preferred to stay on the periphery of the family business, taking the money without getting involved in the details. "Derek, darling," Vivian said, her voice carrying the same condescending sweetness she used with servants. "You did not need to come. Your father has everything under control." "I know he does, Mother." Derek's voice was flat, emotionless. "That is exactly why I am here." He nodded to someone outside the door. An assistant wheeled in a large video screen on a rolling cart and positioned it at the far end of the table, directly opposite Walter. "What is this about?" Walter's smile flickered for the first time. "I did not authorize any video presentations." "No," Derek agreed. "You did not." He picked up a remote control and pressed a button. The screen flickered to life, and Carolyn Mitchell's face appeared. She looked terrible. That was the first thing everyone in the room noticed. Pale skin, dark circles under her eyes, hospital gown visible beneath a hastily draped cardigan, hair that had not been washed or brushed. The face of a woman who had been through hell and was still standing. But her eyes were sharp, clear, blazing with an intensity that made several board members lean back in their chairs instinctively. "Good morning, everyone." Her voice was steady, strong, nothing like what anyone expected from a woman who had died on an operating table 12 hours earlier. "I apologize for not being there in person. I had a complicated night. Emergency surgery. My heart stopped on the operating table. I was clinically dead for 2 minutes in 37 seconds. She paused, letting those words sink in. But I came back because I had something important to do today. Walter's face had gone the color of old cheese. This is ridiculous. Someone turned that screen off. I would not do that if I were you, Walter. Caroline's voice cut through the room like a blade. Not unless you want me to share what I found with the press instead of this board. She began sharing documents on the screen, bank records, transaction histories, emails, financial statements that showed a pattern so clear, so damning, that even the least financially literate board member could understand what they were seeing. For the past 4 years, Caroline continued, Walter Prescott has been systematically stealing from this company. $47 million siphoned through shell companies and fake transactions into offshore accounts. Properties sold to himself at below-market prices, then flipped for profit. Quarterly reports falsified to hide the losses. SEC filings that contained deliberate misrepresentations. The room erupted in shocked murmurs. Board members looked at each other, at Walter, at the screen, their faces cycling through disbelief, confusion, and dawning horror. This is lies, Walter shouted, slamming his hand on the table. Fabrications from a mentally unstable woman who is bitter about her divorce. Is it? Carolyn clicked to another document. This is an email you sent to your banker in the Cayman Islands 3 weeks ago. I will read it aloud for those who cannot see the screen clearly. She cleared her throat. Quote, transfer the remaining funds as discussed. Departure is confirmed for the 14th. Make sure the villa is ready for our arrival. Tell no one. End quote. She looked directly at the camera. The 14th is this Saturday, Walter. 2 days from now. That was when you were planning to disappear with $47 million of this company's money. That email is fabricated. Walter was on his feet now, his face red, his composure cracking. I never sent that. The metadata proves otherwise. But if you prefer, I have more evidence. Carolyn clicked to a series of photographs. Walter and Amber at a restaurant, their hands intertwined across the table. Walter and Amber entering a hotel together. Walter and Amber standing in front of a beautiful Spanish-style villa, smiling at the camera like newlyweds on their honeymoon. These photographs were taken over the past 2 years, Caroline said calmly. They document the affair between Walter Prescott and Amber Lawson, an affair that has been going on for longer than her relationship with Derek. The room went absolutely silent. Every head turned toward Amber, who was pressed against the wall like she was trying to disappear into it. Derek stood up slowly and walked toward his father. You told me she was pregnant with my child, he said quietly. You encouraged me to leave Caroline quickly so I could start a proper family with Amber. You said it was the responsible thing to do. He stopped in front of Walter, close enough to touch. But she was never pregnant, was she? It was all a lie. A lie she told to speed up my divorce. A lie you helped her create so you could steal the money and disappear without anyone asking questions. Derek, son, you do not understand. Walter reached for his arm. Derek stepped back. Do not touch me. He turned to face the room. There is something else. Something that only became clear to me this week when Caroline showed me documents I never knew existed. He paused, and Caroline could see him gathering his strength. This was the hardest part. The thing that had destroyed him for 20 years and would now destroy his father. 20 years ago, my brother Thomas died in a car accident. The official report said I was driving. I was 15 years old. I have spent every day since then believing I killed my brother. Vivian made a strangled sound. Derek, do not. But I was not driving. Derek's voice cracked. Caroline found the original police report, the one with the witness statement that my father's lawyer suppressed. A gas station attendant saw the accident. He saw who was behind the wheel. He turned to face Walter directly. It was you, father. You were driving. You were drunk. And when the police came, you let them believe it was me. You let your 15-year-old son take the blame for killing his brother so you would not face DUI charges. The silence that followed was absolute. No one breathed. No one moved. Vivian stared at Walter, her face cycling through shock, denial, and finally horrible recognition. Walter, she whispered, tell me that is not true. Tell me you did not. Walter's mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. For the first time in his life, Walter Prescott had nothing to say. 20 years, Derek said, his voice barely above a whisper. You let me hate myself for 20 years. You watched me destroy my relationships, my self-worth, my entire life. And you never said a word. He turned back to the board. I am calling for an immediate vote of no confidence in Walter Prescott. He is removed from all positions effective immediately. The board members looked at each other. Then one by one, they raised their hands. The vote was unanimous. Walter tried to run. He made it 3 steps toward the door before security guards appeared, guards that Caroline had arranged in advance through Diane Hartwell. Walter Prescott, one of them said, we have been instructed to detain you until the authorities arrive. Federal investigators have some questions about your offshore accounts. As the guards took hold of Walter's arms, Amber made her move. She slipped toward the door, trying to escape in the chaos. Not so fast. Marcus Webb stepped out of the shadows near the entrance, blocking her path. He had arrived at the building an hour earlier, following Caroline's instructions. I believe you dropped something. He held up a small object. A distinctive earring with an A charm, glittering under the boardroom lights. My sister found this in her bedroom 8 months ago. It is what started all of this. He smiled coldly. She wanted me to return it, said to tell you thanks. Without this earring, she might have stayed with Derek forever. So really, you did her a favor. He dropped the earring into Amber's frozen hand. Oh, and just so you know, Walter's wife is standing right over there, and she just found out everything. Good luck with that. Amber looked across the room at Vivian, whose face was a mask of cold fury. For a moment, the two women stared at each other. Then Amber turned and fled, her heels clicking frantically on the marble floor as she disappeared down the hallway. No one tried to stop her. She was not worth the effort. Carolyn's voice cut through the chaos. One more thing. The room quieted. Everyone turned back to the screen, where Caroline still sat in her hospital bed, pale and exhausted but radiating a quiet power that commanded attention. I now own 67% of this company. I have been purchasing shares for the past 8 months through legal channels, using my own inheritance money. Every transaction is documented, every acquisition is legitimate. She let those words sink in. As majority shareholder, I am assuming control of Prescott Properties effective immediately. There will be a full audit of the finances. There will be an investigation into Walter's activities. And there will be a new direction for this company, one built on integrity rather than corruption. She looked around the room through the camera, meeting each stunned face in turn. For those of you who want to be part of that new direction, I welcome your continued service. For those who do not, she smiled and there was nothing friendly about it. There is the door. No one moved. This meeting is adjourned. The screen went dark. In the hospital room, Caroline collapsed back against her pillows, the adrenaline that had been keeping her upright finally draining away. Her body ached. Her incision throbbed. Her heart, the heart that had stopped beating 12 hours ago, felt like it might pound right out of her chest. But she was smiling. Marcus appeared in the doorway, grinning like a madman. That, he said, was the most badass thing I have ever seen, and I have seen combat. Carolyn laughed, then winced as the movement sent pain radiating through her abdomen. Did we win? We absolutely won. Walter is in custody. The board voted unanimously to remove him. Amber ran out of the building like her hair was on fire. Marcus sat down in the chair beside her bed. You did it, Caroline. You really did it. She closed her eyes, feeling tears slip down her cheeks. Happy tears, for the first time in longer than she could remember. I want to see her, she whispered. I want to see my daughter. Marcus squeezed her hand. I already asked the nurse. They are bringing a wheelchair. You will see her in 5 minutes. 5 minutes. After everything, 5 more minutes seemed like nothing at all. Carolyn lay there in the silence, listening to the machine's beep, feeling her heart beat steady and strong in her chest. The heart that had stopped. The heart that had started again. The heart that refused to give up even when everything seemed lost. Her mother's voice echoed in her memory. Get up, baby girl. You are not done yet. She was not done. She was just getting started. In the hours that followed the board meeting, the Prescott empire crumbled like a sandcastle hit by a tidal wave. Walter Prescott was arrested in the lobby of his own building, handcuffed in front of employees who had feared him for decades. The security footage of that moment would later leak to the press, showing the silver-haired patriarch stumbling between two federal agents, his face a mask of disbelief as photographers captured every humiliating second. The charges were extensive: fraud, embezzlement, securities violations, obstruction of justice, money laundering. And when investigators discovered the suppressed police report from 20 years ago, they added one more charge that made headlines across the country: accessory after the fact in a vehicular homicide. Walter Prescott had let his own son believe he was a killer for 2 decades. Now the whole world knew the truth. His lawyers tried everything. They argued diminished capacity, claiming the stress of running a major company had affected his judgment. They blamed his accountants, his advisors, even his wife. They offered to return the stolen money in exchange for reduced charges. None of it worked. The offshore accounts were too well documented. The airline tickets to South America were too damning. The villa in his mistress's name was too obvious. And the original police report, with its crossed-out witness statement and handwritten amendments, told a story of corruption that stretched back 20 years. Walter Prescott was going to prison. The only question was for how long. Amber Lawson disappeared from the boardroom during the case and was not seen for 3 months. When she finally resurfaced, it was on a reality dating show called $1 Million Match, where wealthy bachelors competed for the attention of beautiful women. Her appearance on the show became legendary, but not in the way she had hoped. During the first episode, one of the bachelors recognized her from the news coverage of the Prescott scandal. He pulled out his phone and showed the other contestants the photographs of Amber with Walter, the evidence of her fake pregnancy, the whole sordid story. By the end of the episode, Amber was eliminated unanimously. The clip of her walking off set, mascara streaming down her face, became a viral meme. When the con artist gets conned, the internet called it. She tried to rebuild her reputation with interviews claiming she was the real victim, that Walter had manipulated her, that she had been young and naive and in love. But the evidence was too overwhelming. The email she had written to Walter, laughing about how easy it was to fool Derek, made it impossible for anyone to see her as anything other than what she was: a predator who had finally met someone more dangerous than herself. Vivian Prescott filed for divorce exactly 6 days after the board meeting. Not because she was horrified by her husband's crimes, not because she felt guilty about her own role in Caroline's humiliation, but because she understood, with the cold calculation that had defined her entire life, that the Prescott name was now poison. She needed to distance herself before the lawsuits started, before the asset seizures began, before the lifestyle she had spent 40 years building disappeared entirely. Her divorce filing was a masterpiece of self-preservation. She claimed she had known nothing about Walter's financial crimes. She presented herself as a victim of his deception, a loyal wife who had been betrayed just like everyone else. She demanded half of whatever assets were not seized by the government, plus the house in the Hamptons, plus a monthly allowance that would allow her to maintain her standard of living. The judge was not impressed. When Caroline's lawyers presented evidence of Vivian's involvement in the campaign to destroy Caroline's reputation, including emails where Vivian coordinated the dinner ambush and discussed ways to make Caroline lose that baby, the judge's attitude shifted dramatically. Vivian got the house in the Hamptons, she got a modest settlement, and she got a very clear message from the court that she was lucky not to face charges herself. She moved to Florida 2 weeks later, bought a condo in a gated community, and reinvented herself as a philanthropist who had overcome tremendous personal tragedy. At charity events, she told carefully edited stories about her difficult marriage, her ungrateful son, her complicated family history. She never mentioned Caroline. She never mentioned Grace. She pretended they did not exist. And in a way, that was the best revenge of all. Vivian Prescott, who had spent years trying to make Caroline feel invisible and worthless, was now the invisible one, forgotten, irrelevant, a footnote in someone else's story. Derek showed up at the hospital 2 hours after the board meeting ended. Caroline was back in her room, propped up against pillows, exhausted beyond anything she had ever experienced. The adrenaline that had carried her through the video conference had long since faded, leaving behind bone-deep weariness and the persistent ache of her surgical incision. But she was not sleeping. She was watching her daughter. The hospital had set up a video feed from the NICU so Caroline could see Grace, even when she could not be there physically. The tiny screen showed her daughter in her incubator, hooked to monitors, breathing with the help of machines, fighting for every moment of life with a stubbornness that Caroline recognized as her own. A knock at the door made her look up. Derek stood in the doorway, not coming in, just looking at her. He looked different than he had at the board meeting. The cold mask he had worn while confronting his father was gone, replaced by something rawer, more human. He looked, Caroline realized, like a man who had just watched his entire world burn down and was still trying to figure out if he was the arsonist or the victim. "She is beautiful," he said quietly, his eyes on the screen. "The baby. She looks like you." "Her name is Grace," Caroline said, "after my mother." Derek nodded slowly and something flickered across his face. Recognition, maybe, or regret. "That is a good name, strong. Your mother was strong." He paused. "Like you." He stepped into the room but kept his distance, standing near the window with his hands in his pockets. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the floor between them, a physical reminder of the distance that would always exist now. "I signed the divorce papers," he said. "Full custody to you. No fight, no conditions, no lawyers trying to negotiate visitation rights or financial settlements." Carolyn waited, sensing there was more. "I also transferred my remaining shares to a trust for Grace, 17% of the company, held until she turns 25. He met her eyes. "It is not enough. Nothing I could give would ever be enough to make up for what I did to you. But it is what I have, and I want her to have it." Carolyn studied his face, looking for the cruelty she had grown so used to seeing, the sneer that had twisted his features when he threw divorce papers in her face, the cold contempt in his eyes when he called her a fat, poor nobody. It was not there. In its place was something she had never seen in Derek Prescott before. Exhaustion so deep it seemed to emanate from his bones. Grief that had no bottom, and maybe, just maybe, the beginning of something that looked almost like peace. "What are you going to do now?" she asked. Derek turned to look out the window at the city below, the city where his family had built an empire, the city where that empire had just collapsed. "I am checking into a treatment facility tomorrow," he said quietly. "Not because anyone is making me, not because it is part of some legal deal or public relations strategy, because I looked at the mirror after that meeting, after I watched them take my father away in handcuffs, and I did not recognize the man looking back." He paused, his jaw tightening. "I have spent my whole life being angry, Carolyn. Angry at myself for killing Thomas. Angry at my parents for blaming me. Angry at the world for being unfair. And I turned that anger into cruelty because it was the only way I knew how to feel powerful." He turned to face her. "But I did not kill Thomas. My father did. And all that anger, all those years of hating myself, it was based on a lie." His voice cracked. "I do not know who I am without the anger. I do not know who I would have been if I had known the truth. But I am going to try to find out." Carolyn felt something shift in her chest. Not forgiveness. She was not sure she would ever be able to forgive him for the things he had said and done. But understanding, maybe. Recognition that broken people break other people, and that Derek had been broken long before she ever met him. "I hope you find what you are looking for," she said quietly. Derek nodded. He walked toward the door, then stopped with his hand on the frame. "She would be proud of you, Caroline. Your mother. She raised someone extraordinary." He paused. "And someday, when Grace is old enough to understand, I hope you will tell her the truth about everything. About what I did, about what my family did, and about how her mother fought back and won." He looked at her one last time. "Tell her that her mother is the strongest person I have ever known, and that I am sorry I did not see it until it was too late." Then he was gone, his footsteps fading down the hospital corridor, growing fainter and fainter until Caroline could not hear them anymore. She sat in the silence for a long time, feeling the weight of everything that had happened settle over her like a heavy blanket. She had won. Against all odds, against all the power and money and cruelty arrayed against her, she had won. But victory felt different than she had imagined. Not triumphant, not joyful, not the rush of satisfaction she had expected to feel when she finally brought them down. It felt quiet, peaceful, a relief so deep it was almost painful. The war was over. Now she could finally start living. Marcus appeared in the doorway 20 minutes later, a huge grin on his face. You ready to meet your daughter? Like, actually meet her? In person? Carolyn's heart clenched. They are letting me go to the NICU? Doctor said you can go in a wheelchair. Just for a few minutes. His grin widened. Come on, Mama. Your little girl has been waiting long enough. The wheelchair ride through the hospital corridors felt like the longest journey of Caroline's life. Every turn, every doorway, every elevator brought her closer to the moment she had been waiting for since she first learned she was pregnant. The NICU was quieter than she expected. Soft lighting, the gentle beeping of monitors, the hushed voices of nurses who moved between incubators like guardian angels, tending to the tiny lives in their care. There were so many of them, so many babies fighting to survive, so many parents sitting beside plastic boxes, hoping and praying and waiting. And then Marcus stopped the wheelchair, and Carolyn saw her. Grace Mitchell, 5 pounds, 2 ounces. Born during emergency surgery while her mother's heart was stopped. Rushed to intensive care before she could draw her first breath outside the womb. Fighting, surviving, living. She was so small, so impossibly, heartbreakingly small. Her fingers were like tiny pink petals, delicate and perfect. Her eyes were squeezed shut against a world she was not quite ready for. Her chest rose and fell with each breath, assisted by machines but determined nonetheless. Caroline reached through the opening in the incubator with trembling hands. Her finger touched her daughter's palm, and Grace's tiny fingers wrapped around it, tight, certain, refusing to let go. Hi, baby girl, Caroline whispered, tears streaming down her face. It is me. It is Mama. I am here. I am finally here. Grace's fingers tightened. I know the world seems scary right now. It seems scary to me too sometimes. There are mean people out there. People who will try to hurt you. People who will tell you that you are not good enough, not smart enough, not worthy of love. She leaned closer, her voice dropping to a whisper. But I want you to know something, Grace. No matter what happens, no matter how hard things get, no matter what anyone ever says to you, I will always be here. I will always fight for you. I will always protect you. And I will always, always love you. The monitors beeped softly, the machines hummed, and in the quiet of the NICU, a mother and daughter held on to each other for the first time. Your grandma used to say that strength is not about winning, Carolyn continued, her voice thick with emotion. It is about surviving with your dignity intact. It is about getting knocked down and choosing to stand back up. It is about being gentle and kind, but refusing to let anyone make you feel small. She smiled through her tears, and baby girl, we survived. Everything they threw at us, every cruel word, every betrayal, every moment when it seemed like we had lost everything. We survived it all, and we are still here, together, a family. Marcus stood behind her, his hand resting on her shoulder. He did not speak. There were no words needed, just presence, just support, just love. Carolyn stayed by Grace's incubator until the nurses gently told her she needed to rest. She did not want to leave. Every instinct in her body screamed to stay, to protect, to never let her daughter out of her sight. But she also knew that Grace was strong, that she had inherited her mother's stubbornness, her grandmother's resilience, her uncle's refusal to give up. I will be back soon, Carolyn whispered, pressing a kiss to her fingertips and touching the incubator glass. I promise, Mama will always come back. As Marcus wheeled her back to her room, Carolyn felt something she had not felt in months. Hope, not desperate hope, the kind that keeps you awake at 3 in the morning, wondering if things will ever get better. Real hope, grounded hope, the kind that comes from knowing you have already survived the worst and finding out you are stronger than you knew. Grace would recover. The company would be rebuilt. The future stretched out ahead of them, uncertain but full of possibility. And Carolyn Mitchell, the woman they had called a fat, poor nobody, The woman they had told to be grateful. The woman who had died on an operating table and come back to destroy an empire was ready to face whatever came next. Because she was not just a survivor anymore. She was a mother, a CEO, a force of nature. And this was only the beginning. 6 months later, Carolyn Mitchell stood in the CEO office of Mitchell Properties. The company had been renamed after she took control, a symbolic break from the Prescott legacy. Baby Grace was in a carrier on the couch, sleeping peacefully. Marcus was sprawled in a chair by the window, eating from a bag of chips like he always did. The office had changed since Caroline took over. Gone were the dark wood and heavy drapes that Walter had favored. In their place were light colors, big windows, fresh flowers on the desk. A photograph of Caroline's mother sat in a silver frame next to the computer. The company had changed too. Under Caroline's leadership, they had restructured, refocused, and begun to rebuild. Revenue was up 40%. Employee satisfaction was at an all-time high. Clients who had abandoned ship during Walter's final years were slowly coming back. It was not easy work. Some days Caroline felt like she was drowning in meetings and decisions, and problems she did not know how to solve. But she had good people around her now, people she trusted, people who believed in what she was trying to build. And she had Grace. Every morning she woke up to her daughter's smile, and every problem seemed a little more manageable. Her phone buzzed on the desk, a text from an unknown number. "You took everything from my family. This is not over." Signed, a friend. Carolyn stared at the message for a moment. 6 months ago, it would have terrified her. 6 months ago, she would have spiraled into anxiety, wondering who had sent it, what they were planning, whether her victory was about to be snatched away. Now, she deleted the message and turned off her phone. "You have that look," Marcus said from his chair. "The Bobby Miller look." Caroline smiled. "I have no idea what you are talking about." "Huh." He tossed a chip in the air and caught it in his mouth. "Should I be worried about whoever just texted you?" "No." Carolyn walked to the window and looked out at the city. "You know what Mama used to say?" "You are about to tell me." She said, "The dogs may bark, but the caravan moves on." Carolyn turned and picked up Grace from her carrier, cradling her daughter against her chest. We're on the caravan now, Marcus, and nothing is going to stop us. Here is what I learned from everything that happened. Strength is not about never falling down. It is about getting back up every single time, no matter how much it hurts, no matter how impossible it seems. I fell down a lot during those months. I fell when Derek threw those papers in my face. I fell when I collapsed in that parking lot. I fell when my plan was exposed. I fell when I died on that operating table. But every time, something got me back up. Sometimes it was anger. Sometimes it was love. Sometimes it was just pure, stubborn refusal to let them win. My mother used to say that patience is a weapon. She was right. But I would add something to that. Patience is not about waiting passively for things to get better. It is about waiting strategically while you build your power, gather your evidence, and prepare for the moment when you can finally strike. They called me a fat, poor nobody. They said I should be grateful anyone married me. They threw divorce papers in my face and tried to take my child. Now I own their company. I am raising my daughter in a home filled with love, and they are scattered to the winds, dealing with the consequences of their cruelty. I do not know what the future holds. I do not know who sent that threatening text or what they are planning. I do not know what challenges are waiting around the corner. But I know this, I am not the same woman who walked into that dinner 8 months ago. I am stronger now, wiser, harder in some ways, softer in others, and I will never ever let anyone make me feel worthless again. Caroline stood at the window of her office, Grace in her arm, watching the sun set over the city she now helped run. The sky was painted in shades of orange and pink and gold, like a promise of good things to come. Marcus joined her at the window, standing shoulder to shoulder like they had when they were kids, watching the sunset from the steps of their trailer. "Not bad for a couple of kids from Kentucky," he said quietly. "Not bad at all." Grace stirred in Caroline's arms, her tiny eyes opening to look up at her mother. The baby smiled, that pure, innocent smile that made everything else fade away. You know what your first word is going to be? Carolyn whispered to her daughter. It is going to be mama. And your second word is going to be fighter. Because that is what we are, baby girl. That is what we have always been. She pressed a kiss to Grace's forehead and turned back to watch the sunset. Behind them, the office hummed with the quiet energy of a company being reborn. Ahead of them, the future stretched out like an open road. And Caroline Mitchell, the woman they called a poor fat nobody, the woman they told to be grateful, the woman who lost everything and built it back stronger, smiled. Because the story was just beginning. And that is the story of how a woman they called a fat, poor nobody became a CEO, a mother, and the person who brought down an entire empire built on lies. You know what I love most about this story? It is not the revenge. It is not watching the bad guys get what they deserved. It is the moment in that NICU when Caroline held her daughter's hand for the first time. Because at the end of the day, this was never really about money or power or proving them wrong. It was about building something they could never take away. A life, a family, a future. Now I have a question for you. If you were Caroline, would you have forgiven Derek? He was cruel, he was terrible, but he was also broken by a lie his father told him for 20 years. Does that change anything? Does understanding why someone hurt you make it easier to forgive them? Drop your answer in the comments. I read every single one, and honestly, some of the conversations you all have down there are better than the stories themselves. If this story made you feel something, if it made you angry or hopeful, or if it made you cry a little bit like it did for me, hit that like button. It sounds small, but it really does help more people find these stories. And if you are new here and you enjoyed this one, we do stories like this every single week. Women who fight back, underdogs who win, karma that hits harder than a freight train. Hit subscribe and tap that bell so you do not miss the next one. Oh, and one more thing, that threatening text Caroline got at the end, the one that said, "This is not over." Well, let us just say there might be more to this story. If you want to see what happens next, let me know in the comments. If enough of you want it, I will write it. Until next time, remember what Caroline's mom always said. The dogs may bark, but the caravan moves on. Keep moving forward, keep fighting, and never let anyone make you feel small. See you in the next one.